All right, so before we start our review today, I want to just paint a little bit of a backstory here. So it was the summer of 2019, and I had just received a call from my friends at Lexus saying, hey, how would you like to drive our flagship six-figure LC500 Coupe for a whole week? Well, I mean, as a car enthusiast, how do you say no to that, right? You know it's got over 400 horsepower, it's got a 5-liter V8 with a soundtrack unlike any other Lexus that's come before it, not counting the LFA, of course, and it's all wrapped up in this beautiful svelte design that literally looks like it drove straight from the auto show display case down onto the production line. But then when that car actually turned up at my house a couple of weeks later or so, well, I was a bit underwhelmed because Lexus had actually given me the keys to the hybrid version, but ever since that experience, I have been itching to sample that V8's viciousness. And now here in the midst of a polar wave here in the Houston area, well, Lexus has delivered. So today on the driveway, we're going to be going through and taking a spin in the 2021 LC500 with the 5-liter V8. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so welcome to the 2021 Lexus LC500. Now, I have been dreaming of the day that I finally get to drive the fire-snorting, just loud, raucous V8 version instead of being slightly disappointed like the first time I drove this car back in 2019 with the hybrid version. Now, I'm not here to talk about what's great and what's not just yet, but I wanted to get to the first thing about this car that really makes it a Lexus, which is the price tag. Funny enough, both of the LC500s that I've driven, both the hybrid and this one, are the first and second most expensive cars I have ever had as a press vehicle. Now, the MSRP on this one is $92,950, which makes it about $2,000 cheaper than the final price of the LS500 that I drove last year. Now, adding on to that $92,000 price tag is over $13,000 worth of options. I'm not kidding. And most of it is taken up by one package, and I'll kind of explain it as we go through the review. But if you add all that up, plus the $1,025 delivery processing and handling fee, and on this example, whew, it comes to $107,095. Now, like I said, this is the second most expensive car I've driven. The LC hybrid that I drove now 2 years ago was $108,600 even. So about $1,500 difference between this and the hybrid that I drove a couple years ago. But the driving experience is a whole different matter. So let's fire that V8 into life and take this baby on the road and see what she's made of. So I've been driving around in this LC500 for a couple of days now, and there are just a couple of things about this car that you cannot get away with. No matter how hard you try, it is pretty much inevitable that these are a couple of things you will experience. Number one, this car is loud. And I'm not just talking about the road noise from those low profile tires I have underneath. I'm talking about the exhaust. It doesn't matter whether you're poodling along in the final gear at 50 miles an hour like I am right now, or whether you've got your foot in it and you're well into the triple digits. This car has a just brutish sound. It doesn't sound like a muscle car, but it's got a very deep, rich exhaust tone that just sends a shiver all the way from my tailbone all the way up to the top of my head. It sounds amazing. The LC500 hybrid that I drove a couple of years ago had a 3.5-liter V6 engine mated to Lexus's new multi-stage hybrid system, and it produced a rather solid 354 combined system horsepower. This thing, on the other hand, with a naturally aspirated 5-liter V8 tucked away up under the hood, makes 471 horsepower and 398 foot-pounds of torque. Whew! Yeah, and needless to say, my right foot has really been itching to make the most use of that horsepower and torque any chance I can get. Now, the benefit of the hybrid is the fuel economy, because in this car, with its big V8, rear-wheel drive, a 10-speed direct shift automatic transmission in the middle, you're looking at 16 miles per gallon city and 25 miles per gallon on the highway, which only seems to come around if you're actually kind to it, because I've been driving this car primarily around in the city with a good bit of highway use as well, and I've only managed about 16.5 miles per gallon. Now, aside from having nearly 500 horsepower under the command of my right foot, there are a couple of other things that I've really been enjoying about the performance aspect of this car. Number one is a Torsen limited slip rear differential. Now, I'm no expert on LSDs, both the happy stuff and the performance side of things, but I do know that in the right conditions, which obviously we don't have that right now with it being rainy, cloudy, gloomy, and a little bit slick out here, this car will send you off into the distance in a heartbeat. It hooks, it goes, it doesn't really spin up the tires that much. You might get a little bit of a wiggle from the back end if you really just lay into it right off the bat. But other than that, it's actually pretty composed when you actually go to do some hard pulls. On the other hand, one thing I really love is the rear wheel steering system in this car. Now, you don't really notice it per se right off the bat, but the rear wheels will actually tilt a couple of degrees when you're actually cornering hard. So I've been doing a good bit of talking during this review already, but there's something else that wants to make its voice known. That's the engine up front. Just listen to this. Oh, yes, please. Woo! And listen to it on the downshifts too. What? This is a Lexus? Oh my gracious. Now, being a Lexus, of course, there are quite a few things that people who buy into this brand absolutely expect off the bat. The first one being, is the car quiet? Well, I wouldn't say it's the quietest Lexus I've ever been in. That title definitely belongs to something like the RX SUV, or most definitely the LS sedan. Definitely deserves that title. But aside from a little bit of tire roar coming through the cabin, I mean, we are riding on some pretty thin tires, it actually is pretty quiet in here. It's very well composed too. I really love the steering. It's nice and weighted. It's very easy to drive. The rear wheel steering may have something to do with that, or it might not. But the one thing I will say that is kind of annoying with this car, and it's not just in wet conditions like this, it's in the plain dry too, it can be a little bit on the twitchy side. And I rarely ever use that word when I'm reviewing a car, any car for that matter, front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive. I haven't really felt a car where the back end kind of skitters around a little bit, even in dry conditions. When I first started driving this car around, I was sort of half and half on it, because the note coming from the engine up front, that giant 5-liter V8 in front that sounds almost like a muscle car, kind of was putting me off a little bit, because all the Lexuses that I've driven before have been quiet, comfortable, relaxed. They don't really put you in that sort of surge of adrenaline mood. It doesn't really tempt you to put your foot down in so many instances. But in this car, it actually does. So, with that being said, I'm sort of still half and half here. It's very quiet, it's very comfortable. The level of detail in the way that it performs on the road is just exquisite. It is a beautiful car to drive. Yeah, I'm sure it has some imperfections here and there, but what I want to know is, does that performance aspect, the part that really gets your heart pumping day after day that you drive it, does that match up to what Lexus stands for? My answer is yes, it does. And there are some other things that match up to what I think a Lexus should be, if not even more than what I think a Lexus should be. And that's where the looks and the level of detail of this car's interior come in. So let's head back to my favorite little spot here in North Houston and talk about the rest of this car, shall we? Now, aside from that glorious monster of an engine that hides under the hood of this car, the LC500 is by far and away, and I'm kind of going out on a limb here saying this, it is one of the most beautiful cars that I've ever seen on the roads today. And I mean, I'm not just talking about the outside, the inside is just as gorgeous, but let's focus on the exterior here for a second, starting with the color. It's one of, I think, about 7-8 different colors that you can get on the LC Coupe, and this one, this beautiful, deep, rich red, is known as infrared. But I mean, I can't stop talking about it. Just look at the design of this thing. I love the premium triple beam headlights, how they're kind of housed in their own little pod here, surrounded by this sort of silvery gray outline that kind of drips down the front, goes alongside the LED turn signals here, which are also on the side of the air skirts that go around the front edges of the bumper. That, of course, exits right here, just in front of the front wheels. And of course you have the LED L-shaped daytime running lights as well. I've also noticed this car not only has the auto high beam assist, pretty typical Lexus, it also has kind of a side light assist. I've noticed when I've been putting my turn signal on or turning into corners, the light sort of gets a little bit brighter and helps illuminate the corners a little bit better. But then as we get here in the middle, this is definitely the most controversial part of any Lexus vehicle that I've ever filmed, the corporate spindle grille. Now, I do say that here on the LC500 in particular, I actually think this grille works, simply because I love the proportions of it. It's not too big, it's not too wide, it's not too tall. It fits the proportions of this car perfectly. And not only that, I love the finish on this as well, this sort of silvery gray that they have here. It matches well with the nice little chrome strip that runs all the way around the outside of the grille. Not to mention you have the shrouded in Lexus badge in the middle. That, of course, coincides with things like the dynamic all-speed radar cruise control. Now, you guys heard me say it earlier, this car has over $13,000 worth of additional options on it, the majority of which is taken up by something called the dynamic handling package. And that particular package in and of itself costs almost $9,600. So not only is the price tag on this car huge, just some of the options can be quite pricey as well. Now, one of the signature pieces of that dynamic handling package are these, the 21-inch polished and painted aluminum alloy wheels. And I gotta tell you, these are the wheels that this car should have had from the get-go. They shouldn't be an optional extra. They should just be the main wheels you get from the factory, not the slightly smaller ones. I think they're like 18, 19 inches in size. But I mean, just look at these. They really set off this car absolutely perfectly. And they're actually wrapped in run flat 245/40 series Bridgestone Potenza tires. And of course, you look behind there, just look at these brakes. They are absolutely massive ventilated discs in all four corners, giant calipers here in the front, of course, with the Lexus badge on them as well. So I mean, not just eye candy on the body, but definitely some eye candy on the wheels and tires as well. Now, aside from those massive brakes, wheels, and tires, there really isn't much else to talk about along the side of the LC500. As you notice, the vehicle is locked right now. We do have power folding exterior mirrors with the gloss black and body color treatment, nice strip of chrome in the middle with an LED turn signal running across the middle. These are equipped with standard blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, and I would expect no less on an over $100,000 car. Now, a couple of my favorite features, starting here on the door, are the front door handles. You notice this car is all about aerodynamics. I mean, you look at the shape of the mirror, how it's got that nice curve in it designed to funnel air right down the side of this car, right over these beautiful curvaceous haunches here at the rear. But if you look at the door, first of all, the car does have a standard advanced keyless access system. So I have the key in my hand here, lock, unlock, you can release the trunk, panic. You also have the releasable key blade that comes out of the bottom of the key. But instead of like touch pads on an externally mounted handle, I could just keep the key in my pocket. I just push in on the front edge of the handle, and that's what unlocks the car. And as you can see, once you lock or unlock the vehicle, if you lock it, the mirrors fold in. You unlock it, they automatically fold out. And of course, you could just give it a tug, and that's what opens the door. Now, if you want to lock it, you can either press the lock button on the key fob or just gently push on the handle itself just a hair, and that's what locks the car back. Now, aside from those cool aerodynamic door handles and the curvaceous shape of the mirrors, there are some other aerodynamic pieces and also things used to shave some weight off this car that are here present on the outside as well. First off, you have sort of an air skirt that goes right behind the door and actually exits right here just in front of the rear tires. But also, in the name of saving weight, that dynamic handling package deletes the body-colored metal roof and replaces it with a full carbon roof. Now, following the curvaceous haunches towards the rear of this LC500, I mean, the design is just as striking in the back as it is in the front. I mean, just look at the taillights. First of all, full LED everything. You've got lashings of chrome here across the top. Of course, the reflector and the shadow gray painted parts and the chrome kind of trailing off into the rear haunch of the car with the reflector in the middle. The taillights themselves, like I said, full LED, and they have sort of a three-dimensional effect that almost makes it look like the light is going off into some kind of infinite tunnel. And I just absolutely love that. Also, down here, your LED turn signals kind of meet with that shadow gray painted piece, drapes off towards the bottom of the bumper. Something I did not mention at the front, which is also part of that dynamic handling pack, although I have no idea what it has to do with handling in particular, is the intuitive park assist. So you have the sensors lining the rear bumper of the vehicle, a couple of them here just above the license plate here. Of course, you have some typical stuff, typical badging, Lexus badge, LC500 badge at the bottom. And then, of course, the backup camera is actually hidden in the trunk lid itself. I was kind of expecting it actually to be more down here, but it's kind of interesting how they put it way up on top of sort of this ducktail here. But speaking of tails, or at least ducktails, you notice this sort of kind of cutout here in the rear trunk. That is also part of the dynamic handling pack. It is a speed sensitive rear spoiler. Now, you can manually raise this with a button located in the middle of the center console. You can raise it or lower it, but usually over about 60-65 miles an hour, this kind of pops up into the wind, sort of again like the LFA supercar, except it doesn't raise up as high and it kind of doesn't look more like an aftermarket wing, just a little bitty kind of ducktail that kicks up into the wind. After talking about all of that, I have to get to my favorite part, which is the LC500's exhaust. Now, yes, I know these are kind of fake exhaust finishers. The pipe is actually hidden way back in here. And although the V6 version sounded okay, it did have quite the synthesized sound on the inside. This thing sounds properly loud. Unlike some big coupes, however, the LC500's cargo area is definitely one of its more disappointing factors. I've seen a lot of big cars like this where things like the whole rear glass and this whole rear cargo area actually opens up as one, but on this car, it's a little bit of a sadder story. Now, funny enough, the external opener for the trunk is actually hidden here inside of the passenger side taillight. You can just push it. That's what pops the trunk open here. And although it is an extremely small space in terms of the numbers and just in terms of visual size, this car actually has the upper hand over both the LC Hybrid and the LC Convertible. You're looking at just under 5.5 cubic feet of space back here, which, as you can see, my tripod, not even fully extended, takes up a majority of the space here, at least in the front. You probably could fit maybe a couple of backpacks, maybe a small carry-on bag back there, and then, of course, maybe a small suitcase here with the slightly larger opening. But overall, not a whole lot of practicality here for the LC Coupe or any of the LC models for that matter. Now, even though the outside of this car is drop dead gorgeous, no matter which way you look at it and no matter what color it's in, it's when you grab hold of the door handle and open these massive doors and take a look inside that you realize why, again, I say this is one of the most beautiful vehicles that I've ever driven and experienced. Now, let's just start with this interior color. It's one of about 4 different colors you can get the interior of any of the LC models in, and it has quite a tasty name. It's called Toasted Caramel, and it contrasts beautifully with this infrared exterior that we have here. And I love little details, starting with the snap little leather strap straps here that hold in the color match seat belts that we have. You also notice these seats are half leather and half Alcantara, but that is, again, going back to it, part of that dynamic handling package. You notice the seats also are much more heavily bolstered. I would say anybody over about 190 to 200 pounds may have a little difficulty fitting in here. I myself, I'm about 185, 187, so I still fit in here okay. Also, with that dynamic handling pack, you also get the carbon fiber door sill scuff plates and protectors. I love those. I love how it kind of transfers from the gloss to the matte carbon here on the front part of it. It's just one of those moments where I feel like I have to pinch myself every time I'm sitting in the driver's seat of this car. I mean, I have dreamt about driving something like this for the longest time. Now, I'm not one of those people that dreams about, you know, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Porsches, McLarens, all that kind of stuff. I dream about something like this because to me, this is the perfect combination of beautiful craftsmanship, performance, luxury. I mean, it has basically everything you could want in a luxury, almost GT car, because it is kind of built to do a little bit longer distances, even though you probably wouldn't get very far with the fuel mileage that this thing gets. But still, I mean, just look at everything. This beautiful perforated 3-spoke heated and leather wrapped steering wheel with all the functions and controls you could possibly want. Like I said, this car does have the dynamic all-speed radar cruise control, so the settings for that are here, as well as the distance sensor up top. You have the button for the lane departure warning system with active steering assist. You have things like seek track and radio mode functions, not to mention your hands-free Bluetooth with voice recognition. You have an aero pad up here which controls the majority of the functions in the thin film transistor display that composes not only your tachometer but also an additional screen that you can access with this little button up here that looks like it's just the back button, but the moment you push it, you notice the main tachometer actually scoots over and reveals a separate screen over here on the left-hand side. Again, another detail taken from the LFA supercar. You gotta have some sort of change to this car's personality, right? So you go up here and you have these two little stalks protruding from this sort of Alcantara and leather-lined upper part of the dashboard here. Over here on the right are 6 different settings for the drive mode select system. So if you twist it up, you have the Sport and Sport Sharp. So Sport Sharp. Of course, Sport Sharp gives you a full white outlined tachometer. Again, more LFA DNA going on in here. You push the button in on the side, that is normal and even a custom mode, which kind of allows you to tailor your driving experiences just so. And then if you twist it once, that puts it in comfort mode. Twist it towards the down position, twist it down again, and that puts you in eco mode. But I think I'm just gonna leave it in normal mode for right now. And then over here on the left, you actually have the off button for the traction control, as well as what might come in handy within the next few hours or so, a snow mode. So I can actually twist that knob down and it will actually put this car into a sort of less powerful state to where it can handle more icy and slick road conditions. And very quickly, brushing underneath the steering column here, we do have a power tilt and telescope function thanks to the little nodule right here, along with a couple of little extra buttons hidden in their own little stitched leather area over here on the side of the console. You have instrumentation dimming and odometer and trip meter up here on the upper part in this little metallic area. And then down below, you actually have the button to open the fuel door, which you'll be doing quite a lot. You have the trunk release and the button for the optional heads-up display. Now, it's kind of hard to see, but it's way up there at the top of the dash. That's a $900 extra if you want that on its own. Now, if there's one area of this car that I genuinely feel makes things a lot more complicated than it needs to be, aside from the fact that you have about a zillion buttons on the steering wheel, it is, you guessed it, right here, the 10.3-inch information display, or multimedia display in this case, with things like the Lexus Dynamic Navigation System, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and Amazon Alexa compatibility, and about a jillion other things. Now, it's not the screen that bothers me. I actually really like the screen. I like that it's kind of neatly set a little further back in the dash with a nice plastic cover over the top of it. It's the fact that that screen is controlled by this. You guys know what this is. This is the Lexus Remote Touch Interface. Now, you do have a few different functions in here. I can press the menu button. I go across the bottom. I have destination, audio, phone, I have the N-Form app suite, I have the projection setting, which is the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and Alexa. I have system information, system setup, and even a function for the climate controls, which you have a pretty simple setup down here, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But let's say you want to do something like, I don't know, turn on the heated seats or the ventilated seats. You have to go to seat and steering, and then and only then can you actually go figure out which seat you want to heat up or cool down, or in this case, if you have the optional heated steering wheel. As you can see, I have the heat on it right now, but I have to scroll over to it and then actually scroll up to turn it on, and then I scroll down if I want it off. I honestly think that is just complete and utter overkill. Now, as a true audiophile, I can't talk about the inside of this car without making note of that Mark Levinson audio system. 13 speaker Mark Levinson reference surround sound system, and I'm just gonna tell you guys, it sounds phenomenal in here. So now that we've got all the complicated stuff out of the way, let's talk about a few little more simple things here on this car's interior, starting with just the climate zone controls. You saw all the stuff up there in the infotainment display. This is just some of the physical aspects of the climate control. So you have temperature displays on either side of the fan speed, as well as where you want the air to go, whether you want it to be pulled in from outside or recycled, or you can just leave it on automatic. On the left, you have the button to turn the air off, as well as the automatic setting. And then on the far right, you have front and rear defrosters, as well as heated exterior mirrors. Now, it may be hard to see, but you look underneath. Hello, welcome to the 90s, everybody. This is 2021, but we still have a CD player. If you look down here into the rather beautifully sculpted center console, first of all, can we just address we have kind of an O-blank handle right here that's nice and leather bound with a beautiful kind of silver strip here along the side. But we come down here to the middle, we do have a nice little cup holder here in the front. You guys saw I have my bottle of Pepsi. I can fit that in there without any issue at all. We've already pretty much gone over all of the remote touch interface. Just above that, however, we do have some of the physical buttons for the radio if you can't be bothered to use the ones on the steering wheel. So I have radio and media. So if you're wanting to go to your Bluetooth functions, you can tap the media. And then of course, radio is AM, FM, Sirius XM satellite radio. The power and volume knob. Coming over just to the left of that, however, we of course do have the rather interesting selector for the 10-speed direct shift automatic transmission. It works just like the other one. Park is the little P button here hidden behind the shifter. If you want to go into reverse, you push over and then up with your foot on the brake. Of course, that reveals your backup camera there. You want to go into drive, push over and pull back. That automatically puts it in drive. And then if you want to take control of the gears manually and use the paddles up here, when you're in drive, you just pull the shifter straight back and that puts it into manual mode. And of course you have your little indicators down here as well. And then right behind the shifter, actually, go ahead and put that in park. We have the automatic brake hold. You've seen that on a lot of cars before. And then we also have the button to raise and lower that speed sensitive spoiler in the back that you guys saw earlier. And then of course, what would a center console be without a good bit of storage? And this one actually works in a very interesting manner. First off, you can push this little silver tab down here in the middle there, but let's say you need even more space than that. There's a little latch underneath, and suddenly this tilts all the way up. So now you can actually put things in the middle, be it your masks, your spare car keys, your phone on the charger, which by the way, there's 2 USB ports down in there and 1 auxiliary port in there as well. So I've told you guys this a few times before, but I'm 6'1", and while I have no problem fitting in the front seats of this car, you can see just through that small little crack between the passenger seat here and what is supposed to be a back seat, there is really no room back there. But I did want to at least show you one cool little party trick of this car. So if I pull the latch to fold the seat forward, if I pull it, you can see that the seat itself actually just rolls forward just a hair. So now you can actually push that forward and let it actually go up a little further. And this allows you access into the rear seat. Well, everyone, that wraps up our review and drive of the sumptuous and exquisite 2021 Lexus LC500, the V8 monster with the pursuit of perfection. If you guys learned something in this video, or perhaps you like what you see, please give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit that subscribe button down below, because trust me, it does benefit the both of us in the end. At the end of the day, however, though, I have to give the biggest thank you ever to my friends at Lexus USA for finally making my pursuit of perfection dreams come true. I have had the biggest blast ever driving this car around, and I will continue to do so, assuming the weather cooperates with me for the rest of the time that I have this car. But in the end, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I will see y'all next time. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.